Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Mabel Barrison, the director of the Institute for European Studies. And we're really fortunate today to have with us Sergio Garcia Margarino. No, I'm doing an Italian pronunciation, sorry. Any rate, he has been a delight to be here, and he's working with our students. And I'm going to turn this over to Patricia Young, our I call her a managing director, but I don't think that's the right title for her in the whatever Cornell personnel. What?
Program manager.
Program manager. Managing director sounds much better. But anyway, she is going to actually provide the details of Sergio's biography. So, okay.
All right, so just tell you a few words about Sergio. He has a PhD in sociology with an international recognition and is a specialist in education and social development. He is currently an associate professor at the Public University of Navarra and a researcher at its Institute for Advanced Social Research, Ecomunitas, or IQ. He's co-founder and director of the Institute for Global Knowledge, Governance and Development, and associate researcher at the think tank Globernance. He has been a visiting scholar at the University of Essex, at Cornell, previously in 2022, right, Sergio? Yeah. Visiting professor at the University College of Dublin and consulting professor at Noor University in Bolivia. His research interests include processes of violent radicalization, mechanisms of collaborative governance, collective security, social and economic development, and issues related to the sociology of science and religion. These are reflected in some 85 academic articles and books. He is a regular contributor to written and audiovisual media. He was included in the catalog of Thinking Heads 2020-2021, which is a communications consultancy, as one of the 100 most talented speakers in Spain. In addition, Sergio is the host at Ecomunitas of our Inaudi Global Internship in Spain, which is now in its third year. The Spanish Xenometer project that he will talk about today is one of the projects that Cornell summer interns are helping with. And we have here previous interns, Victoria and Adriana. So welcome, Sergio Garcia.
Thank you very much for the generous presentation. I'm very happy to be here for different reasons. But main one is that coming to Cornell has been very fruitful for me in terms of a network of people, also understanding other ways of doing research. And also I found beautiful people who have been very kind to me. So it's a pleasure to be here. And so that's why, first of all, I want to thank the Institute of European Studies, Mabel, Patricia, and also I want to thank all of you who came to this presentation. I hope it's grateful. And especially also I want to thank Sydney Taro for coming here. I know it's an effort and I feel very privileged to have you here. So thank you for coming. I'm gonna talk about this project we call Xenometer, which is an attempt to use artificial intelligence to do social research. But before starting with the project, I really want to place it in a wider context. And this wider context is related to three main points. The first one is the nature of the challenges society is facing. The second one is because of these complex challenges we are facing, we need innovation. And then the third point that has to be with the bigger context is the relation between technology and society. One of the many layers of the relation between technology and society is how to use technology for social research. So, in terms of the challenges, I would say that there are three main features that characterize the challenges that humanity is facing nowadays, and these features make them unique. The first one is that these challenges are global, are complex, and are interdependent. When we look at climate change, I wrote them I wrote it climatic boiling because the United Nations speaking about boiling, which is harder. But that climate change, diversity management, the aging of population and the impact that this has on the maintenance of social protection system, especially in the liberal democracy, the global threats that the United Nations has typified, international terrorism, international crime, civil war, genocides, international conflicts, mass destruction weapons, even poverty. These kind of threats are global, are really complex, interdependent. The democratic crisis that some countries are experiencing, wars, disinformation, misinformation. I don't want to make you sad, but these kind of challenges are global, are complex, are interdependent. So addressing them requires new, fresh approaches. Then the second feature of the nature of the problems we face nowadays is what I call a dilemma. And why it's a dilemma? Because some of these problems are the results of extremely successful policies. And that's why it's so difficult to address them effectively. Most of the problems I wrote in the previous slide, as you could remember, there were extremely huge conflicts. Sorry. I don't know how to go backwards. I'm spoiling the presentation, right? Yeah. Okay, now I think, sorry. I just wanted to remember. These were the kind of all these problems. Most of them are the result of successes. So I will give you 3 examples. The first one, climate change. We could say that climate change is related to economic policies to make countries grow in general terms. And this economic growth has been based in industrialization, and it comes from the Enlightenment and how to use rationality to increase productivity and so on. So that was very difficult to address that problem because we were very successful in the development process, but now this is generating a higher non-intentional problem that is difficult to be addressed. Aging of population and the stress that it's exercising over the social protection systems. That's been the result of extremely successful policies to enlarge life expectancy and also the policies of birth control. The same with the problems I call them cognitive fragmentation problems. We have difficulties to address holistic systemic problems. And the reason why we have difficulties to do so is because from the Enlightenment, specific way of organizing knowledge emerged, which has been very fruitful and has to do with making reality smaller, taking smaller pieces and create disciplines to address these more specialized areas of research and action. That's been very fruitful, but now that we face complex, systemic, holistic issues, we don't have cognitive instruments to address them. That's why in universities also there is this notion of interdisciplinary research, transdisciplinary research, etc. Then some people say that we are the victims of a very particular way of thinking that it's called techno-instrumental rationality. And that means that we think that everything has technical causes and we can find technical solutions for social and economic problems. And that prevents us to address these problems that requires debates, collaboration. But again, why? Because technology progress has been extremely high over the last decades, and that has generated certain way of thinking. And even students, most of students now, they prefer to do technological careers because it seems that it's more, you will have better jobs, but at the same time, it's emphasizing, it's reinforcing this way of thinking that prevents us to address these holistic systemic problems, etc. Disinformation, that's a big problem, even it's generating public health difficulties, but disinformation is being the result of a successful effort to provide people with information, especially with technologies of information and internet. But now we lack instruments, intellectual instruments to distinguish between truth, false, and so on. And third point I want to mention about the nature of nowadays problems is that the political instruments humanity has devised to manage, to rule society seem to be outdated to address these new social problems that are related to a new social reality. That it's well known for most people, but then the political instruments still are related to a previous age. So globalization, which is a very known notion, but then the instrument we have to manage societies is a nation state. Still, there are attempts to create international institutions, but they don't function in the same way as the national state. But we cannot manage global flows of people, of technology, of goods and services, global flows of weapons, if we don't have international political institutions to have an effective global governance. The same with democracy. In the past, people wanted to vote, and that was enough. That legitimated governments. Nowadays, tomorrow we have an election, probably in 2 weeks, people will protest against that government that was elected by the people because the new ways of legitimization seem to be needed. The notion of transparency, which was really important for politics, when you take transparency too far and then trust in institution decreases, it becomes a kind of nudism, nakedness. I don't know if that word ever exists, but and in that kind of context, it's very difficult to come to agreements because in political negotiation, some things need to be confidential before they come into the public debate. So that instrument, transparency, which has been very, very important as well, it's now exhausting its capacity to address the way negotiations take place. Second point, I think because of the previous one, innovation is needed, right? And innovation usually is related to technology and patents. But then there is another sort of innovation that has to do with political and social innovation. And that's more challenging. But we could say that the creation of the nation state in the 17th century was really a very important and unique innovation that allowed society to live better, a peaceful world, especially in Europe, because of the invention of the national state that didn't exist previously. The invention, the innovation of the United Nations as an instrument to apply collective security at the level of international relations has been an extremely good innovation. Still, it requires more elements to be effective, but there is a seed of a political innovation. The same with the European Union. The same in the United States with the application of the principle of federalism to articulate such a complex and difficult society and create one country with one national identity. That's been innovation. And in the same way, innovation is required in the ways we do research. I would say that the project I will present is related to this attempt to innovate, or at least do things a bit differently in the area of social research, although probably it won't be so different. Right? In this book, it's called Experiments in Real Time. I address some of the notions I mentioned before. Well, the third point, technology and society, technology and social research. The Xenometer project has a history. There is a background, so if you want to know about the specificalities of the project, I can also provide later with paper, but I also wanted to share some of the previous steps, the preliminary steps we gave to start with that. So I would say that the first step we took at the Public University of Navarra was just to see which are the implications of artificial intelligence. Here we have a new instrument that has been operating like since 3 decades, but now because of the increasing capacity of managing data, it's having much more influence, but it's been there for a while. But we were trying to analyze the implications of artificial intelligence in different realms of social life, at the political level, at the ethical dilemmas, even the legal system, economic implications of artificial intelligence, the implications of artificial intelligence for organization management, social impact of this device in the way we relate to each other. And in that sense, we coordinated a special number in a journal called Sociology and Technoscience, where different scholars wrote papers about the different layers, the different facets I mentioned. Then the second step was to do a survey in the region where I live, Navarra. There was an organization of tech companies that wanted to know the need of digital talent. They call that the need that the companies in that region have of people with IA skills. They call it digital talent. So we try to identify the different capabilities related to artificial intelligence, and then we survey 3,000 companies, and then we prepare a report about it. So that was a second approximation to this technology, particularly artificial intelligence and social research. And then a third preliminary step was just to contribute to what we call algorithmic literacy. Usually when we speak about technological literacy, what people mean is, okay, we have to train people to use technology. So there is this also gap between different generations. We have to make sure that all generations, all social classes have access to technology and they can learn how to use technology. But there is another dimension, and that's the dimension we try to address, which is algorithmic literacy. That means how we help people to understand how these algorithms function, to prevent disinformation, also to know what's happening when they go into internet and social networks. And in that sense, we had some courses, presentations, interviews. And then finally, there was a project we had. There is a documentary here, the War of Machines. The government of Spain has granted one research group in my university to analyze the relation between war and conflicts, international conflicts. And after 15 years, also we received a grant to prepare a documentary. So there was a filmmaker that helped us, and the conclusions of of these 10 years of research were in the documentary. This was more for the dissemination of insights. But then the next and last step was, okay, now we are approaching technology, but with a perspective that is more critical, try to see the implications. But especially people who are in the tech area, they are learning how to use it for different purposes. So we asked these questions to ourselves. Why don't we learn also to use these artificial intelligence devices to do social research? Because social research has been done using artificial intelligence. But most of people who do that are people coming from artificial intelligence and technologies. And at least our experience was that they don't have much social science training. So there are biases, there are like the kind of questions they ask maybe are not the most relevant questions for society and so on. So we decided to create a kind of interdisciplinary group to start doing small research, small projects using artificial intelligence. So the first one was a project that was published in this journal, OBETS. It was simple one. We wanted just to see which is the representation that the most influential politicians in Spain have on migration. So we use a a simple tool of artificial intelligence to do so in a specific social network. And that was quite promising. We had a good experience. There was a group of people who wanted to strengthen that capability. And in my department of sociology and social work, the director of the department also wanted to train a new generation of professors to learn how to use artificial intelligence for that. And during that time, I was fortunate to be invited to Cornell Tech campus in Manhattan a couple of years ago. Beth Lyon, Professor Beth Lyon, she was organizing a workshop, 3 days workshop, and one of the interns Patricia mentioned that came to Spain 3 years ago, she told Beth, why don't you invite some people from Spain that they've done this research on the representation of migration. So I went for that conference, and in that setting, we consulted about the possibility of doing something that Cornell had been doing for a couple of years, and I will focus on that from now. And that's the project, we call it Xenometer. Yeah, Cornell has done it here for 3 years now. We started 1.5 years doing that, and Adriana and Victoria, who came to Spain last year, actually they help us a lot to establish the dynamic with a group of people there to do so. They also, one of them comes from computer science, the other one comes from political science, government. All right, so the vision, right? With this project, the vision is to create the global map of xenophobia online. Yeah, so what's this global map? So what we want to have is national units of people in different countries that analyze xenophobia in different social networks. We have started in 2 countries, the States and Spain, but we are trying to widen the number of countries. The 3 ones that are in the next step are El Salvador. There is a team in UK University. There is another team in South Africa, another team in Indonesia, and those will be the next steps. And then we have people in Argentina, the University of Buenos Aires, in Poland, the University of Warsaw, in Venezuela, UCLA, and in Bolivia, NUR University, and in Mexico, who have shown interest in doing something similar. And what we aim is to meet one goal, which is to be able to have an automatic system to label different levels of xenophobia in X, and in a representative number of accounts within that social network. But the purpose of doing that is more training a group of people to do so. It's not to resolve a big question, but to train people to do that in other areas. So for instance, in the particular case of Spain, the security forces have expressed interest in doing something similar automatically, but for hate speech, that is a crime in Spain. That's one area they are interested. The second one is self-indoctrination, because again, in Spain, that's also a crime. Glorification of terrorism is a third area where they have interest, and we have interest also in doing that for polarization. There is a group in Madrid who has already done it, and they published recently, 2 months ago, one paper. We will organize a conference and we'll invite them to participate in a university, in a conference, to see how they did that for polarization. And another step will be to have a conference in Spain. We're having one conference on this particular topic in May, and Beth Lyon is organizing another one in South Africa for 2026. So people who are in these countries I mentioned will come to see which are the next steps. Before explaining the mechanical aspects of the project, I just wanted to underline something I have already mentioned, that is that we are aware that social media don't represent social reality, and that within the area of social media, X, that is the first social network we are analyzing, is not even representative of all social media. Now, I will give you one example. The surveys that analyze the difference between affective polarization of population, that affective polarization, very specific phenomenon. It shows that the population polarization is lower than the political polarization. And the political polarization is lower than media polarization. So there are different gaps between each of them. But at the same time, we are focusing on social media, but we are also aware, conscious of these limitations I have mentioned. So the mechanics, right? The mechanics, the machine we are training is based on seven categories. So we are using a 7-level scale, and what we are trying to do is to label manually 500 tweets, messages in each country.
5,000, no?
5,000. What I mentioned? 500, 5,000 messages in each country. Why? Because it seems that with 5,000 messages, the machine, the algorithm can work properly, especially if we have more or less similar number of messages for each category. And as I mentioned, the team of people who are working is interdisciplinary team. Usually they are sociologists, students, lawyers, and they work together. And then people coming from artificial intelligence, right? So the model we are using is called transformer, and what it does is once we have these messages labeled manually, then I will explain the methodology to do it manually and collectively. The system breaks the tweet into smaller pieces, and each word has a number, and then it analyzes the relation between the words, and then it compares the different labels we've established with the relation between the words. And then it says, okay, this message is related to migration or not. And if the message is related to migration, it gives it a category. It's 0, below 1, below 2, below 3, 1, 2, and 3. And those who are studying computer science, the specific model is LSTM. If you have questions, probably Victoria will respond to them about that particular. All right. So then, we were trying two models. One of them was a recurrent neural network, LSTM. But then we decided, I mean, the team that is more into artificial intelligence decided to use the other one, the transformer one that works better. I didn't mention that apart from the tweets we are labeling manually, another technique is being used, which is creating syntactic data. But it's taking one message and try to adjust it a little bit, because it's the same label, but at the same time there are different words in the same sentence, and that can be done manually or using another technological system. We are using this large language model to create this synthetic data to train the algorithm. In terms of the coordination structure of the project, which is, I think that's the best part of that we are really learning to work together, a group of people comprised by these different individuals that I mentioned. There is four teams of labelers. They label, we label, all of us do the labeling process. Then there is one person who is in charge of the dynamization or coordination of this field work of labeling. Then there is a scientific direction, and then there is the team, the more technological oriented team that do also the programming for that. So then what we are looking at is, as I mentioned, xenophobia, and what we have seen is that it's important to have this national unit. Some of you would ask, why? If you have a centralized team and use different languages to do so, we could do that, probably. But what we've seen so far is that there are many nuances that are very difficult to identify if you use even the language. So for instance, our team in Spain was trying to label messages in Spanish from or some for the United States accounts, and it was really difficult because in the Spanish context, for instance, using words that are politically incorrect here, and they show xenophobia as black, no? In the Spanish context is not that bad. But at the same time, there are words in Spain like mena, which is a simple word. It means a teenager non-accompanied or something like that. It's very bad there, but probably here it doesn't mean anything, even Spanish, right? So that's why we have decided to have these national units to be able to train the algorithm capturing these nuances, and at the same time, it requires to add a geolocalizer for the algorithm to make sure that it recognizes that the accounts are in Spain or in the States. So culture plays an important role here. So how labeling and calibration operates? There's 3 steps. One of them is how we obtain messages. The second one is these calibration meetings, and then the categories. In the case of the States here, to obtain messages, what they do is they have identified official accounts that shouldn't be anti-migration, and they monitor these accounts. In the Spanish case, we followed a different path. We started with the same accounts we used for this first research I mentioned, the one about the representation of migration of the most influential politicians. We used those same accounts, but then after 500 messages, there were no more messages about migration. So we had to find messages from other sources. So the second source we organized was organizations. Try to identify organizations that are pro-migration, and organizations that are anti-migrant organizations to capture the nuances, as I mentioned. The same, we came to a point where there was like standard messages all the time, so there were no more nuances. So we decided to use other accounts, simple accounts, individual accounts, influencers accounts, use keywords as a source to download messages, to capture the nuances that also in common language people are using to describe migration in positive or negative terms. These are some of captures of how it works. This is, so you download the messages through this NDJSON system, but then it transforms that into an Excel sheet, and it simplifies the system I've mentioned. Also provides with metadata. It's not only the content of the message, it says also the nature of the account, the time, the day, and other details. But then when it is transformed into an Excel document, it reduces the amount of information it has. Then once we download the tweets, we distribute the tweets amongst the 4 teams I mentioned, and each team is comprised by 3 people, and they assess the same messages. As you can see, there is this Cornell XM. That's the one that Adriana Victoria introduced. So each team is comprised by 3 people, and they analyze the same messages. Now I will say why. The reason why is that each individual labels every 3 weeks about 100, 150 messages individually. And this is the kind of things they have to click. If it's related to migration, it says yes. If it's not related, it says no. And then the number and the reason, number and reasoning. And then what we do is to blend these Excel sheets. Each team, or the person who coordinates the field work, blends the different sheets each individual has, and then this blending shows the conflicts in the labeling within every team. So if we were in the same team, 3 people in the same team, and the same message was labeled as 1, 2, then in the calibration meetings, that is the next step, the calibration meetings, we identify in yellow the messages where there are conflicts or labeling, and we discuss. We say, okay, what should we do? We discuss if it's a 2, it's a 3, and these calibration meetings are really useful for different reasons. One of them is that it helps us to make consensus and to categorize finally the messages, but there are other reasons. One of them is that they help us to objectivize the categories and to refine the description of each category. That's a process, never-ending process. So we agree upon the categories, the meaning of each category, but in every calibration meeting, there are some elements that are introduced, so we objectivize further the categories. And then at the same time, we write the agreements. We write the agreements, the reflections, and important insights that emerge, because we address this from the perspective of rigorous methodology, or we are trying to devise a rigorous methodology to do so. So that entails also a methodological refinement and constant conceptual refinement. Well, this is an example of the categories. I will say a few words about the different categories. 0 is just, yes or not is migration related or non-related to migration. But then there are 7 categories, as you can see, right? If there is yes, if you write yes, then there are 7. 0, which is very uncommon, 0 means that there are only facts about migration. So it is related to migration, but it doesn't judge. We found very few ones, because usually people use data for other purposes or their intentions in the message. But well, 0 means that there are no judgments, positive or negative, it's just facts. Then the negative ones, we have agreed upon this. In Cornell, they do it differently. Our agreement is below 1, that means that there is prejudice against migration, but it's subtle. It's subtle. Below 2, there is prejudice, but it's very explicit. It's very explicit. And below 3 is that there is a call to action. There is somehow a call to action to do something against migration. This way of classifying that has been very helpful, because it was very difficult to come to agreements, despite the fact that you saw there was a cell called reasoning. There were 5, 6 reasons you could use for each category. But despite that, it was very difficult to come to agreement. So finally, this simplified way of describing the category has been very useful. And the same for the positive ones. The number 3 means that it's positive towards migration, but subtly. Second one is people who are very pro-migration, very explicitly. And the third category means that there is a call to action. There is a proposal of policies or whatever to favor migration. Right? So these are some examples in Spanish I wanted to show you, but I really want to show you how the algorithm functions a little bit. That way you can see in practical terms how it works. It doesn't work perfectly because we haven't trained it totally, but I just wanted to show you how it works. So I don't, could we